Nice to have you on board. We're going to keep the conversation going around conscious living, and we're going to start off talking about the first principle, which is that life is a journey. And I'm hoping that we can have a little bit of interaction on this conversation. Since it's a conversation, I'm going to do less talking this time and hope that we can get, the real conversation working, just questions, and I'll try and help us to co-create the learning as we're going along. All right. So, last week again, or the last episode, I had spoken about how we have our physical senses and, the way we're created, soul, spirit, body, the same way that we have our physical senses, we have our spiritual senses. And for us to get to the top of the mountain, it actually requires us to connect more with those spiritual senses in order to make better decisions, clearer decisions. So this week, as I said, we're talking about life is a journey. And, when I was preparing for this, I stumbled across a particular book that I had read many years ago called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. If you have not read that book, I would really advise or recommend that you read the book. The book it's almost like a read on how life works, and he wrote it around a shepherd boy in the Andalusian mountains in Spain, and how day to day all he does is, as a shepherd, you just follow your sheep from place to place. There's no clear direction, there's no clear goal, you're just following your sheep. And just a little bit like all of us, right? When you're living in this world, we're almost like sheep. We're just following and going with the flow, and we don't have clear direction. And as our principal in Sensible Core Coaching always says, Sochi will say, you let life live you, and you're not living life. There's a huge difference between the two. So what we have right now is that many of us have life living us. And we're not deliberately, consciously living our lives, just like the sheep and the shepherd. Then one day, this young boy called Santiago had a dream, and he had to, he had a dream, and the interpretation of that dream was that he's supposed to, there's a pot of gold, there's a treasure waiting for him somewhere in Egypt. And he got somebody to interpret the dream. Cut the long story short, he sold his flock, gave the dream interpreter 10%, collected the money, and headed off to Africa to search for his treasure, his personal legend. When he got to Africa, what happened? He was robbed. They took all his money, and he was just there. He was thinking, okay, should I go back to Spain and just know that this is a bad omen, or should I continue on the journey? And he decided that, okay, you know what, I'm not going to give up, because what I'm looking for is this treasure. And he decides that, okay, he's going to work to get the money back and go on his journey. Now, the long and short of it is that this journey took him on several adventures. Several challenges came his way that he had to overcome. And with every single challenge that came his way, and every single opportunity for him to overcome the challenge, he was growing and developing himself, to the point that when he eventually found the treasure, yet again somebody stole it from him. And he concluded that, look, life is about the journey and the things that he had learned along the way, not necessarily that pot of gold that he was looking for, but it's really about the things he learned. Like when he was working in the crystal shop, he learned persistence. He learned not to give up. He met somebody along the way that helped him to believe in himself. He met somebody along the way that helped him to realize that he's greater than who he is. You know, we keep saying this over and over again. Psychologists and scientists have said it, that we're only using a very tiny part of our brain, that the power that we have as human beings, we're not even tapping into it already. So he learned along the way that, you know, he has a lot more power spiritually. He even found love. He found love with a girl in one of the villages that he went to, and that helped him to connect with his inner self. He learned a lot about himself. He learned a lot about his needs, his desires along that way. So back to the topic of this particular conversation, we're saying that life is a journey. Life is a journey. And if we think about it, a journey is rarely from point A to point B on a straight line. Rarely from point A to point B on a straight line, right? And the journey will take you on different adventures. You will cross roads, you will climb mountains, you will go through valleys, and it's all part of life. If you go back to the last conversation, the first conversation we had said that before you were born, everything you require to succeed and to achieve what you are meant to achieve here on earth was already planted within you. So every single, like I think we mentioned the oak tree, the acorn, before the acorn was planted, everything that acorn requires to be a beautiful, magnificent oak tree was already in the seed. And then you plant the seed in the ground, and depending on the water, the environment, the climate, and the nurture that seed has, it will determine whether the oak is a stunted oak or the oak grows into a magnificent, solid structure, right? So basically, that is really what we're talking about. And what I'm trying to say here is that all that you require to fulfill your purpose here on earth has already been deposited inside you before you were born. So what you need to do and what is required of you on this your journey of life is to identify those talents, those gifts, those strengths that has already been deposited inside you that would help you to achieve your mission here on earth. Of course, the question that most people would ask is, okay, so how do I know my mission? I think it was asked in the last conversation that we had as well. How do I know my purpose? How do I know my mission? And the way, before I even talk about how to identify your mission, what I'm going to liken it to, right, is life is like a school. Remember again, the last conversation we spoke about the Yoruba proverb that says, Aye loja orun nile. So our own ancestors here in Africa already recognize the fact that this world is a marketplace, and heaven is your real home. So we're only here for a very short period of time. And in any marketplace, people come to do different things. I liken life to like a school. This journey is your ability to go through and transition in this school called life, right? And with any school, you can imagine a university setting. Some people are in faculty of social sciences. Some people are in the faculty of science. Some people are in even within those faculties, they have different departments that they are in. So what we need to realize is that we're all here doing different courses. We're all here doing different things. You cannot compare yourself to the person that's doing biochemical engineering. You might be doing, BA arts. So we're all here doing different things, and therefore release the pressure. And I know that we've heard this over and over again, but I'm going to say it again. I'm going to reiterate the fact that you should not... I think we say, don't use somebody else's clock to do your own work. We're all on different journeys, and we're also all at different levels. We're all doing our own thing at different levels. So there's sometimes when you look at life and you're like, this person has it easy. This person's life is so easy. They don't have any issues. They don't have any challenges. Well, every single person will have certain challenges they're supposed to overcome here on earth. But, you have to recognize the fact that some people are on primary 1, primary 2. Some people are on secondary education. Some people are on tertiary education. And basically, what that means is that your tests, your challenges, the things that come along this life journey, they are different for every single person. So don't envy this person, or don't look at what the other person is doing, because you are on your own journey. You are on your own path with your own set of things to overcome. So another thing, somebody has said, don't use another person's watch to tell your time. Absolutely. So don't use another person's watch to tell your time. You know, you have friends that are more successful than you, quote unquote. You have friends that are less successful than you, again, quote unquote. But really, it's everybody's where they're supposed to be at any point in time. Mafia gwala go shishe. Thank you so much, Chrysalis Conversations. That's the Yoruba mafia gwala go shishe. You know, that's number one point. When you understand that life is a journey and everybody's on a different journey. Mafia go ala go shishe, right? So what I like us to also understand from this is that, you know, there's a saying that if you want to be happy in life, put your effort in controlling the sail and not the wind. So I don't know if anybody, what does that mean to you? If you want to be happy in life, put your effort on controlling the sail and not the wind. So again, life is a journey. The wind will always blow. The wind is there. Whether you like it, you have absolutely no control of the wind, but it is certain that the wind will blow. As certain as there's day and night, there is certainty that wind will blow. Sometimes the wind will be a gentle breeze. Sometimes the wind will be a gale force wind. But what I love about this quote is that it's saying, if you want to be happy, put your effort on controlling the sail. The sail is what you have control over. The sail is that thing, that's the only thing you can control. But what do we do? What do we normally do? What we normally do is we'll blame our ancestors. We'll blame our village people. We'll blame our parents, our siblings, that this is why I'm where I am right now. We'll blame our office. This person victimized me. My boss victimized. You know, we blame every single person, which is okay. Blame them, but focus on what your focus is. Focus on what you can control, which is your response to whatever is going on around you. You know, there's some people who are going through storms, even multiple storms. But, you know, I have a particular person in mind who, regardless how life moves her, you see her outside and she's calm, cool, collected. You see her and she seems to know exactly her focus, which is, look, focus on what I can choose to be happy even in the storm, and I can choose to rest. So you can imagine if you're on a boat, right, and you have the wind blowing. You can choose in the storm, you can choose to just sit down. If you sit down and allow the storm to blow you all over the place, what happens? You know, you might be thrown off course, you might be thrown off track. But what you can do is literally get up. It requires your own effort and start controlling the sail. Sometimes you can even use your effort and the position of the sail to move you further. So as that wind is blowing, depending on how you respond to that wind, you can even get further than if you just stay and wallow in the woe is me, what am I doing, where am I going type of conversations. So life is a journey. Let's understand that some people's journeys are long, some people's journeys are short. Whatever it is, the essence, I think he said that enjoy the process of life. The essence of life is actually going through the process and going through the lessons and challenges that you face along the way, and going through the refinement, because every single process, every single challenge that you face is actually refining you. So what I've learned to do is, when I have certain challenges that come my way, yes, I can be upset, But I've learned to tune, to try to find out, what is this challenge teaching me? What am I supposed to learn from this challenge? How else can I look at this problem that will benefit me? And what can I do to overcome this problem? So no matter what the challenge is, conscious living requires that you recognize that challenges are supposed to mold you, grow you, refine you, and not necessarily to define you. Challenges grow you. So what are we doing? What are we supposed to do? What we're supposed to do is really to see how we can overcome and refine ourselves from the challenges that come our way. Now, questions that I'm asked, I don't know if anybody has any. We're like halfway down the line now. Any questions, any thoughts, any comments? Hi Benga for joining. Hi. Any questions, any comments? Okay. All right, so I'm going to go on to the next concept. So the first principle that we shared is life is a journey. Focus on what your focus can be, and what your focus is whatever is under your control. The next principle I wanted to share was, be still and listen to the silent voice. The silent, still voice. We had spoken in the last conversation about how, when you're climbing up the level of consciousness, the ladder of consciousness, it requires you to not solely rely on your physical senses. Your physical senses is you at the base of the mountain. Your physical senses is quite limiting. There's so much you can understand, you can see, you can hear from just interacting with your physical senses. As you climb up the ladder of consciousness, we are tasked, because we are made up of, we're soul, spirit, body, tasked to start engaging our spiritual senses. The same 5 senses that we have as physical, we have in the spirit. So how do we start engaging our spiritual senses? Number 1, or number 2, be still. Listen to the silent, still voice. We always say that we are probably the most distracted generation in probably forever. We are distracted. We have so many social media devices. We have our phones, we have our laptops, we have, even on the phone, we have WhatsApp, we have Telegram, we have, so many things that distract us. And even life, especially if you're living in our environment, in Nigeria, in Africa, it just always seems that there's something going on. The mere activity of living, you're dealing with domestic stuff, you're dealing with so many things at the same time, makes life quite difficult. But we need to be still. To connect with your inner self, we need to be still. I'm encouraging us all, if we don't have a practice of being still, I'm encouraging us all to get into that practice of just listening. I know that many of us, we do pray, but how many of us stop to listen and connect? Drop everything that is going on around you, listen and connect to your inner senses, connect to your spiritual hearing, connect to, in today's world, they call them your clair senses. So that's your clairvoyance, clairaudience. Connect, because when you're able to connect at that level, you are moving further up the ladder. And when you're further up the mountain, not the ladder, when you're further up the mountain, you can see further, you can hear further, you have better discernment, right? And that can only be cultivated when you practice stillness. And you stop thinking about, I think now they call it mindfulness. Practice being mindful, practice prayerful, practice meditation. There was something I was watching, I don't know if it was Oprah, that was talking to an expert around depression. And, research actually shows now that the people who focus on prayer and meditative practices, that their ability to overcome depression is higher than those who do not do those practices at all. So even science is starting to realize that there's just some things that you cannot explain through science. There's some things that science cannot explain away or validate, but they know that it exists, right? They know that there is some sort level amount of power that, I don't know if it's our will, our brain, our spirit, there's just something about us that is beyond what science can test, science can measure, and how powerful the human being, the human brain, the human body and anatomy is. So conscious living actually requires that you tap in to that 90% that human beings don't tap into. We're tapping into like 10% right now, but it requires you to start learning the practices to tap into the 90% so that you can live more deliberately, you can make better decisions, and you can see with clarity. You see the way things actually are, not the way that things are as colored by your perception or colored by, you know, your brain and the understanding and the memories and thoughts and ideas that your brain has stored, which sometimes actually always tricks us. Right. So I have some. Let me just stop here for a few questions that have come in. Farati, hi, I see you. Said you talked about a person who focuses and doesn't really get moved by what goes on around. Is this the same as being still? Okay, you talked about a person who focuses and doesn't really get moved by what goes on around. Is this the same as being still? Okay, not exactly. So being still just means that you are able to shut down the chatter in your mind. Because when you have a lot of chatter, when you have a lot of issues, problems that you're dealing with, emotional trauma, whatever it is, your engaged energy, your ability to think about other things is actually limited. Your mind focuses on how to repress those things, the chatter, instead of focusing on the things that you're not seeing. So being still is just a way for you to drop, you know, when you're worried about something. In fact, worry increases certain cortisol levels, your hormones increases, and what it does is that it reduces your ability to think clearly. So what being still just means is that try to drop, minimize, place those problems somewhere for a moment. Because when they're going on, it's like, you can imagine if you have a space, and that space, 90% of the space is filled with your issues and your problems, and you're trying to get out of the box. There's very little space left for you to think of the creative solutions or for you to get inspiration on how to resolve the issue, right? So what we're saying with being still is that practice on a regular basis how to lay down, lay aside issues, concerns, problems, worries, and just be still to listen to direction. Your spiritual senses are like any other muscle, any other sense that you have, any other gift, any other talent that you have. The more you use it, the more it becomes activated, or the more it becomes, the keener it becomes. So the more you listen and connect with your clairaudience or your spiritual ears, the more you will hear from that level, from that plane, from that state of being that has a clearer vision or a clearer understanding or a clearer awareness of what is going on with you. And the more you can connect with solutions that bypass your natural thinking process. Solutions that will appear as divine solutions, but they're just solutions that are at a higher level of thought, a higher level of awareness that we often don't tap into. So when a person focuses on what doesn't really, said you talked about the person focusing and doesn't get moved. Okay, so what I mean by the person focusing means that don't look at your problem. And I said don't look at the wind. The only time you should focus on the wind is to set context and say that, okay, I'm in this type of wind, a gentle breeze, or is it a gale force storm? You understand the context. Your focus should be on connecting to how to overcome. If the wind is a challenge for you, is focusing on how you can overcome that challenge, and trusting that when your focus is right and when you're connected at a higher level of awareness, the solution to that problem will come. The question now is that, are you able to trust the solution that comes to you at that other level, or the heightened level of awareness? And again, we're going to talk about that as we go along in these conversations. I have another question here. It says, when you say spiritual, what do you mean? Okay, so the first conversation that we had spoken about how human beings, you're a soul. Your soul never dies. Your soul is that part of a human being that lives beyond the physical. And I mentioned the fact that Yoruba people, or there's even Africans, not just Yoruba, Africans know, from our ancestors, we know and we have that belief that people are here just for a while, which is why when people die in this part of the world, we celebrate their home going. In fact, sometimes on the posters, you say a glorious exit, glorious home calling. They're going back home, right? All they've done is that they've left their physical senses and they've gone back to their soul. They've gone back to where they came from, right? So your spiritual senses are the senses that your soul uses to connect with the level above the physical level. Physical body uses the 5 senses. Your spiritual senses are also there, which is why, some people will say, you have people who say they're clairvoyant. They see things before it happens, right? There's some people who will hear, maybe you're going down a road and something tells you, don't go that way, go this way. That something is not physical. You're not hearing it. You don't know it from your brain. You haven't seen it, but something which in today's world they call intuition, but what it actually is used intermittently with your spiritual senses. So your intuition is your spiritual sense. It's like that level works on the spiritual plane, right? So you have your spiritual hearing, your spiritual knowledge. Some people just know, if you're a Christian, they say you have the word of knowledge. The word of knowledge, you just know without seeing, right? That's really part of you activating those spiritual senses. And the spiritual senses are not your physical senses. So that's what I mean by spiritual, is your ability to connect more with those spiritual senses, because the spiritual senses are more accurate. They'll tell you that if you have, a gut feel about something, gut feels are never wrong, because gut feels see beyond. Okay. gut feels sees beyond. So I have my team that are sending messages to me and distracting me in the background. So please stop distracting me. Thank you. So gut feels are never wrong. Gut feels, it's really something. They always say that listen to your gut, your intuition. As we said the last time, there's sometimes that you go into a room and something just, those are not physical senses. They're just some people who have energy that are not in alignment with your energy. They have, negative energy, whatever, vibe, whatever you want to call it. So your spiritual senses are picking up on those senses, on things that are not, in the physical plane. That's basically what it is. When you have the gut feel and you now go, you want to go left and somebody tells you go right, and you go right and realize that there was an accident on the left. We all have it. I'm sure every single person on this call would have had a situation where things don't make sense. You just make a decision, it doesn't make sense, and then you find out later on that that decision that you made is actually the right decision, right? So that's what I mean by spiritual. It's just, and that's really what conscious living is about. Getting to activate your spiritual senses and focus on your spiritual senses more on a day-to-day, and more or less live on that spiritual plane as you interact with the physical world. Because when you're there, as I keep saying, your decisions are better, you can see clearer, you can hear clearer, and basically be able to make decisions about your life that are aligned with what your soul purpose is supposed to be. So that's why we keep talking about focusing on your spiritual senses. Another question. Bengatu said, can living be sustained at the level of consciousness or subconsciousness? Should the practices of conscious living lead us ultimately to subconscious living? Interesting. Okay, so this is a really, really great question. Yes, can living be sustained at the level of consciousness or subconsciousness? So subconsciousness, that level, are the things that are going on that you are not aware of, right? And we said that there's Carl Jung that said, unless you make the unconscious, and I'll use subconscious as well, unless we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. So there are a lot of things in your subconscious that are ruling you. You are reacting to things around you because there are programs in your subconscious that you are reacting, that making you react, and you're not even aware of it, because our habits, our behaviors have become habitual. We're not even conscious of the things that we do and the reactions we make to different things and different stimulus, right? So what we're saying with consciousness is that start understanding the things that are not in your awareness, your sphere of awareness. Make it open, shine a light on it, and by the time you shine a light on it, you'll be able to control and be more deliberate about controlling your life. So yes, you can live on a higher level of consciousness. As I said, it's like a mountain. Consciousness is like a mountain. When you're at the bottom of the mountain, there's very little you can see. You can just see, maybe the mountain. But if you climb to the top of the mountain and you are on a higher level, you are able to see all the things below the mountain. So you can see all the things that the physical senses are seeing or hearing or doing. At that level, you can see at a higher level, and you can also see at the lower level. So people who are very spiritual and practice, mindfulness, meditation, prayerfulness, many times they live at a higher level. They are very, very sensitive. Their discernment is keen because they connect regularly at that level, at that plane, right? So yes, is the answer to that question. You can sustain it. There are times that you fall down to the bottom, but the important thing with conscious living is for you to be aware. So when you fall down to a lower level of consciousness, you can quickly shift and take yourself back up. So for instance, if you find that things trigger you, there's some things that always trigger you, you start asking yourself, why are you being triggered by this thing? Why is this thing getting you angry? Why is this thing making you behave in a way that you don't necessarily want to behave? Start interrogating what program is going on under the scene. So, there's some people who think that because you're spiritual or you are on a higher level of consciousness, you don't get triggered. That's not true. Your trigger is just a way of your body telling you that something is out of alignment. The human body is meant to be in a state of homeostasis, which means that you're supposed to be in a state of equilibrium. And when things throw you off your equilibrium, you react. The important thing with conscious living is that don't wallow in the reaction, don't wallow in the reactivity. Note that you're reacting, quickly catch yourself and move to a higher level of being, a higher state of being, and you're able to be more deliberate about your action. So you're not reacting, you are choosing your action consciously. Another question here is, I hope I answered that question, Benga too. You can just give me a little wave if I answer the question. It says, should the practices of conscious living lead us ultimately to subconscious living? You can put it in a way like that. It depends on how you want to look at it. So, yeah, sort of. I would say sort of and not so. So it depends on whether I don't think it's subconscious living, because subconscious means that the subconscious is where you don't know, you can't see, you don't have any control of, right? So if you think about, I know many people know the iceberg model, where you have a little iceberg at the bottom, at the top. You can see just a little iceberg at the top, but under the water is massive. You have a a bigger iceberg at the bottom. And what's actually going on is that little iceberg that you can see, the 80% of the iceberg is actually what is directing and moving that bit you can see at the top. So subconscious living means that you are, you don't even recognize what is at the bottom of the ice, below the surface. But conscious living means that you are able to identify the things in your subconscious below the surface that you are not aware of and is controlling you. Identify it and move it into the conscious, and you reduce your subconscious, basically. So as you start reducing and identifying things that are in your subconscious, you start, so basically, when those things that are in your subconscious, sometimes they anchor you to the base of the mountain. And by the time you start releasing those things, it actually makes you lighter. And you start ascending to a higher level because you've released things that are in your subconscious, right? So no, conscious living doesn't necessarily mean that you're living in your subconscious. No, it just means that you're living at a higher level of consciousness. Okay, another question here. I hope I answered that question, Benga, too. Thank you for the response. Another question here is, some people feel if they are not in a state of worry, there won't be solutions. How can we balance being still and being worried? Okay, so worry is, there's some emotions that prevent you from solution states. Those emotions, worry is one of the emotions that are actually being driven by your subconscious, right? Because you think about it, when you're worried about something, what are you really worried about? What is really going on here? There are many times that we worry about things that don't actually necessitate us being worried. But these things that we're worried about are things that, for instance, let's say, for instance, you're looking for a job and you finally find a job. And it's taking you a long time to find that job, and you finally find this job. But unfortunately, in your office, 2 or 3 months later, they're laying people off, and because you were one of the last people to come in, they lay you off, last in, first out, right? Yes, it is natural to worry, because in your mind is saying, oh, it took me so long to get this job. I didn't have money. I'm going to go back. So your mind will be going in a loop. Your mind will be worried, yes. But what conscious living requires is that you look at that worry. Worry is an emotion. It means that something is out of alignment. What exactly is making me worried? Is it a real worry? Is it a worry based on things that have happened in the past? Really understand what is driving at the base of the iceberg that is driving that worry, and you lay it aside, because worry doesn't solve anything. Worry is one of those things that really anchor you. You lay it aside. Okay, worry is not going to solve anything. How do I get my solution? And being still, when you lay aside that worry and you're still and you connect to your divine source of truth. So one of the principles of coaching, as I'm an executive coach. I train people to be coaches. One of the things about coaches, and coaches don't tell you what to do, because one of the basic tenets of coaching is that every individual, every human being is fundamentally adequate. And we believe that the answers lie within you, that nobody can give you the answer to your own truth. So what coaches help you to do is to connect to your own inner source of truth, your own inner guidance. For people who are Christians, is connecting to your spirit, the Holy Spirit. And in a lot of world religions, you will find similar practices. So the Buddhists will meditate. Practically all traditional cultures and religions have some sort of ritual or ceremony or practice that they use to connect to their inner being, because we have the answers within us. And what happens when you get addicted to people giving you solutions to your problems is that the people that are giving you solutions to your problems, if they are not on that level, you can't see whether somebody is on the level, that spiritual level, or even higher, to connect to the universal source of truth, to connect to their own spirit, to give you the answer to your own problem. Many times their advice is colored by experience from the past, problems that they have solved for other people. Who says that the solution to your problem is the solution to the other person they counseled or they gave advice to? So what we try to do with coaching and what we're doing with conscious living conversations is to get you to connect to your own solution. My path and my life is a journey. My journey and the path that I'm supposed to take to where I'm going, it doesn't have to be, it's not necessarily the other person's journey. So learning to connect at a higher plane and living on a higher plane, higher position on the mountain helps you to see your own path. Because remember, we said, before you came, there's no accident in the kingdom of God. Before you came, and there's no accidental human being or accidental birth. No. Everybody came here for a reason. There is a purpose to your existence. And what happens, unfortunately, is that many of us, unfortunately, we don't find that purpose. But even in the journey of trying to find your purpose, there is growth and there is learning, there is refinement of your soul, of your spirit, right? So learn to go with the flow, the purpose, the journey, enjoy the process of life, and not necessarily the goal that you're trying to achieve. So how can you be still and not worry? Okay, how can you balance being still and worried? I like that question. It's almost like a mind over matter and a practice matter. That's the truth. The more you learn to drop your worry, the more you learn that there is a higher power that can take that worry and trust and have faith that once you've dropped that worry, the problem with us, and I think I'm not being judgmental, but I think a lot of the issues that we have as religious people, and I'm using religious for a reason, I'm not saying spiritual, because a lot of us practice religiosity. We believe we have faith, we pray, but we don't. When you pray, really honestly, if you have faith that prayer has been answered, you don't have to worry. That's the truth. But we still carry the worry, and when you carry that worry and continue to worry, honestly, is the opposite of faith. It's opposite of you, getting the answer to the problem that you have already prayed about. So when you practice being still, it just means part of that practice is that every single worry, every single problem, every single challenge that you have in that moment, you learn to lay it aside for that moment. And when you learn to remove, you can imagine if you're looking for an answer for something and there's clutter, you're holding on to worry, holding on to anger, holding on to anxiety, you're holding on, you can't receive direction. You can't receive anything because you're holding on. But if you take that thing you're holding and place it aside, all but for a moment, and do this, you open up to direction, you open up to get answers, because there's an answer for every single problem. Even if the answer is go this way, not now, believe, if the answer might even be just wait. But every single problem, challenge that you're facing in your life has a solution. It's whether you believe, you find it, or you believe that the solution can actually happen. But I am saying that every single problem has a solution. All right. So we had 555. I like numbers. I've just looked at my time now, and it's 5:55. That's a special time. I like numbers, so people know that I like numbers like 111, 555, which is why the first session that I did, Conscious Conversation, I had, it was on the 5th of the month of the year 2025 at 5 p.m. I just like those kind of rings to yeah. Okay. So we're now 5 minutes to the hour. I'm gonna stop for anyone, any questions. View requests from Center for Core Coaching, is that right? No? Any questions from anyone? Thank you so much for the questions that have come in so far. I hope that I was able to answer them. Yeah, okay. Any questions from anyone? There's a question. Jovial Juro, what's your take on indecisiveness? Can it impact conscious living? Right. Okay. So indecisiveness, when you're unable to make a decision, usually means that you're not connected to your source of truth, or you're not listening. It usually means that you're still in your brain power, you're still thinking about your solution. Lagos Gist, good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, Lagos Gist. How are you? So indecisiveness, just what indecisiveness is showing you is that you're still not in alignment. When you're living consciously, usually you have some level of alignment, and you're able to have clarity, and you're able to make decisions based on the clarity that you have. So when you're living in indecision, you are either not fully connected to the source and the answer, or you're not believing. Is one of two things. Either you're not hearing the direction you should go in, or you have heard it and you're not believing, you don't believe, you don't have the faith that that is the direction that you should go in. So indecision, if you struggle from indecision, sometimes I still have that, I procrastinate because I'm not able to make the right decisions, simple decisions. Maybe it just means, again, go back to the principle, be still and listen to that voice. Is in the moment of stillness that you will hear, you get clarity on direction and clarity on what you're supposed to do. The question now is, can you trust what you're hearing? And I want us to, as we round up, I want us to really practice asking questions and trying to be still. And if you have questions about things, ask and see if you can connect with your spiritual senses. If you can pray, meditate, whatever it is, just be still. Every problem, lay it aside. Find a quiet place and see whether you get answers to. And then you look at cues as well. There's sometimes that you might not get the answer maybe in that process, that time that you're praying, you're meditating, you're listening. But look out, because life will give you cues. Holy Spirit, God gives you cues along the way as well. He gives, somebody might just say something. Start being sensitive to certain, you'll know in your spirit that, okay, that thing is like an answer to the question that I was asking today, So start looking at cues. Something might show on the TV. Somebody in the office might do something that is directly related to what you're doing. So what I'm saying is that let's start, you can learn from different things. You can learn from, you get cues all over the place along the journey. And that's also another thing that I think that book, The Alchemist, found out, that along the way, along his journey to finding his personal legend, which is his purpose, there were many cues, many I think it's cues that I'll use, right? There are many nuggets, many cues, many nudges that if he hadn't listened to, he wouldn't have gotten to the next place. So let's start being more conscious and start being more aware of cues that you will get to help you and to direct you on the path and the journey that you're supposed to go on. Cues are abounding. If you pray for cues, you will get the cues. If you ask for cues, you will get the cues until you're strong or aware enough to actually trust the connection that you have and the level that you're going in the spirit. Or should I say because I don't want to make this a religious thing. Is as you go higher on the level of consciousness or level of awareness is what I should say. Okay. All right. So we are now at the hour. Thank you so much to everyone that was able to join this conversation. I hope that we've learned one or two things from that we're going to even take away from. I hope we can we can move with one thing that we're going to do differently, being still. I know there's somebody on this call now that says that, I know she goes out in the morning. She goes out at 5 in the morning because that's when she feels that she can be still. That's when she feels that she can connect. And that's where she feels that she can hear, because there's nothing going on. There's just a lot of stillness. So different people have different ways, different places, different times that they engage with being still. So, my challenge for us this week, for all my conscious living community, is to practice being still. Just be still and see what comes to you. And then begin to start trusting the messages that you hear, the cues you get along the way. But what I can assure you is that once you have asked the question, the answer is there for you. It's just for you to unpeel the layers and connect with the answer that you're given. The answer is always there. The answer is always within you. Start relying on your own inner voice, your own inner spirit, for your direction on your life journey. It's your journey to be had. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jovial Juro. Thank you, Abby. Hi, how are you? Nice to see you. Thank you, Time Out Technique, Ima Chris 3, Toxi GA, Chrysalis Conversations. Thank you, everyone that stayed from the beginning to the end of this. And we will see you in another 2 weeks for conversation number 3. Have a wonderful evening and stay conscious. Bye.